Kitchen Confidential, Adventures in the Culinary Underbelly, by Anthony Bourdain. Introduction. I want to tell you a story. It's about a wedding. The bride is beautiful, dressed in virginal white. Her new husband and all her family are just a few yards away, happily eating their dinner in a bustling seaside restaurant. But the bride isn't with them. She's slipped out the back. Right now, she's behind the restaurant, next to the garbage bins, bent over a 55-gallon drum of waste. Her white gown is hiked up over her hips. And the restaurant's chef, well, he's behind her, taking her from behind, while his entire kitchen crew, the dishwashers, the line cooks, peer through the window, watching the whole scene unfold. And as this is happening, a young, lost dishwasher in that kitchen, a kid who feels like he has no purpose in the world, looks at his chef, this pirate, this rock star getting a send-off from a total stranger's bride, and in that moment, he knows, with absolute certainty, what he wants to be. He wants to be a chef. That young man was Anthony Bourdain, and the book he wrote, Kitchen Confidential, is not just a collection of stories like that one. It's a passport into a secret world. A world that exists behind the swinging doors of every restaurant you've ever been to. This book sold millions of copies. It wasn't just a bestseller, it was a cultural earthquake. It changed the way we think about chefs, about restaurants, and about the very food we eat. Bourdain wasn't just a cook, he was a renegade storyteller, a punk rock philosopher with a chef's knife, who exposed the gritty, hilarious, and often brutal reality of the culinary underbelly. He was a man who went from washing dishes in a tourist trap to becoming a celebrated chef and a globe-trotting icon. But how did he get there? What did he learn in those dark, chaotic kitchens that can teach us about life, about work, and about finding our own way? I promise you, by the end of our time together, you will understand the secret code of the kitchen. You'll know why you should probably never order fish on a Monday, why brunch is a battlefield for the B team, and why the people who cook your food are some of the most extraordinary, dysfunctional, and loyal misfits you could ever hope to meet. But more than that, you'll discover the profound and timeless lessons hidden beneath the grease, the grime, and the glory of a life spent on the line. Book summary. For the young Anthony Bourdain, food wasn't always an adventure. For most of his childhood, it was just fuel, something you put in your body when you were hungry, like filling up a car at a gas station. Then, on a family trip to France, something shifted. It was on the Queen Mary, a grand ocean liner crossing the Atlantic. He was just a kid, maybe 9 or 10 years old, and a waiter served him a soup. But this soup was different. It was cold. He'd only ever known Campbell's tomato soup, always hot. He asked the waiter what it was. Vichyssoise, the man replied. And that single word, vichyssoise, was like a magic spell. He remembered everything: the waiter ladling it from a silver tureen, the crunch of the tiny chopped chives on top, the creamy taste of leek and potato, and the thrilling surprise that it was cold. It was the first food he ever truly noticed, the first food he remembered enjoying. It woke something up in him. Later on that same trip, his parents drove to a famous restaurant in France called La Pyramide. At the time, it was the center of the culinary universe, run by the legendary chef Ferdinand Point. This was a pilgrimage for his parents. And what did they do with young Anthony and his brother? They left them in the car. For 3 hours. As he sat there, bored and furious, a profound realization began to dawn on him. Food could be important. It could be an event. It had secrets. And by being denied it, a door opened. He decided, right then and there, out of pure spite, that he would outdo his parents. He would become the true adventurer. He would eat everything. That decision led him to another life-changing moment. He was in a small oyster village, out on a boat with a crusty old fisherman named Monsieur Saint-Jour. The fisherman reached into the water and pulled up a huge, silt-covered oyster. He popped it open with his knife and handed it to the boy. His parents hesitated. His little brother recoiled in horror. But young Anthony, filled with defiance, took the glistening, almost alive thing in his hand, tilted it back, and with one slurp, wolfed it down. He said he remembered that moment more fondly than losing his virginity. It tasted of seawater and flesh, and somehow, of the future. He had survived. More than that, he had enjoyed it. In that moment, he learned that food had power. It could inspire, shock, and impress. It was an adventure, a risk. And that single oyster set him on a path he would follow for the rest of his life, a long, often self-destructive chase for the next new sensation. His life as a cook, and as a chef, had begun. Of course, the path from that first oyster to becoming a chef was not a straight one. By the time he was 18, Bourdain was, in his own words, a spoiled, miserable, self-destructive young lout. He dropped out of college and was drifting, completely rudderless. He ended up in Provincetown, Cape Cod, a small fishing village that turned into a chaotic, anything-goes party town in the summer. Broke and needing a job, he landed a gig as a dishwasher at a tourist-trap seafood restaurant called the Dreadnought. It was there, scrubbing pots and peeling mountains of potatoes, that he found his calling. It wasn't the work itself. It was the people. The cooks ruled that kitchen. They were like gods to him, a tribe of pirates. They had their arms slashed off their chef's coats, wore faded headbands, gold hoop earrings, and tattoos. They had style and swagger, and they seemed afraid of nothing. They drank everything in sight, stole whatever wasn't nailed down, and carried big, badass knives sharpened to a razor's edge. They spoke their own profane, secret language, a dialect of countercultural slang and local slang that was both intimidating and alluring. To the young dishwasher, this wasn't just a job, it was a life of adventure, of looting and pillaging and rock and rolling with a complete disregard for conventional morality. It looked pretty damn good from the other side of the line. That was the summer he witnessed the chef and the bride behind the garbage bins. And in that moment, seeing the absolute power and freedom his chef seemed to possess, Bourdain knew what he had to do. He wanted in. He wanted to be a chef. But wanting it and earning it are two very different things. The next summer, the Dreadnought was bought by the owner of the most respected and feared restaurant in town, Mario's. The Mario's crew were legendary. They were the loudest, crudest, most badass cooks in town, and they served hundreds more meals a night than anyone else. Bourdain, cocky from his minor promotion the year before, showed up for his tryout shift wearing a brand new, light blue seersucker suit, ready to impress the local yokels. He was assigned to work the broiler station alongside a man named Tyrone. Bourdain remembers him as being 8 feet tall and 400 pounds of carved obsidian, a black Viking with a silver-capped front tooth. Unintimidated, Bourdain started shooting his mouth off, bragging about his so-called experience, trying to act like some street-smart professional. They were not impressed. When service started, it was chaos. Orders poured in, more than he had ever seen. The tickets were in Italian, filled with code names he couldn't understand. The heat was horrific. Flames leaped from the pans. The floor was ankle-deep in pasta. He was drowning. Then, he burned himself. A small red blister rose on his palm. Foolishly, he asked the giant Tyrone for some burn cream and a Band-Aid. The kitchen went silent. Tyrone turned slowly, his eyes bloodshot, sweat dripping from his nose. "What you want?" "White boy?" he said. "Burn cream? A Band-Aid?" Then he held up his own enormous hands. They were a hideous constellation of water-filled blisters, angry red welts from grill marks, and old scars where hot fat had made the skin roll off. They looked like the claws of a monster. While Bourdain watched, transfixed, Tyrone reached under the broiler with his naked hand, picked up a glowing hot sizzle platter, and set it down in front of him. He never flinched. The other cooks roared with laughter at his humiliation. He had been exposed for what he was, a loud-mouthed, useless little punk. They called him Mal Carney, bad meat. That night, something inside him hardened. He decided he would go to the best cooking school in the country, the Culinary Institute of America. He would endure anything: evil chefs, terrible pay, brutal conditions, and he would come back. He would have hands like Tyrone's. He would earn his place. He would show them all. The Culinary Institute of America, or CIA, was a bit of a shock. Located in a former Jesuit monastery, it was a world of identical white uniforms and funny paper hats. For a guy who idolized Hunter S. Thompson and Iggy Pop, this was a major change of scenery. But he was ready. He had a mission. The school in the 1970s wasn't the prestigious institution it is today. It was filled with farm boys, misfits, and flunkouts. The curriculum was old-school French, based on the heavy, cream and butter-laden dishes of Escoffier. Think beef Wellington and lobster thermidor. The instructors were mostly burned-out European chefs, full of gin blossoms and spite. But Bourdain thrived. He was older, he had real-world experience, and he wasn't afraid of the pressure. The final class before graduation was the legendary E-Room, the Escoffier Room, a 3-star restaurant open to the public, ruled by a monstrous, iron-fisted French chef named Chef Bernard. Bernard was rumored to have worked with Escoffier himself, and his name was only spoken in whispers. If you screwed up in his kitchen, you got the 10 minutes. In full view of the public and your trembling classmates, Chef Bernard would unload the most withering barrage of scorn imaginable. "You are a shit, chef," he would bellow. "I make 2 cook like you in the toilet each morning. You are a disgrace. Look at this merde." He'd stick his fingers in your failed soufflé and fling it on the floor. Students would literally go AWOL rather than face him. One of his friends, a Vietnam combat veteran, disappeared just days before graduation, terrified of his turn on the soufflé station. When Bourdain's time came, he was ready. He'd already been humiliated by Tyrone. He'd already hit rock bottom. As Chef Bernard began his tirade, Bourdain did the convict thing. The louder the authority figure got, the calmer and more detached he became. Bernard saw it in his eyes. He saw that this kid had already been broken and put back together. The fat bastard didn't scare him. And because of that, Bernard respected him. After graduating, Bourdain was a dangerous commodity. He had formal training, he had street experience, a criminal mind, and an impressive vocabulary of curse words. He was ready for the big time. Or so he thought. His first major job was at the legendary Rainbow Room, high atop Rockefeller Center in New York City. It was one of the biggest, busiest restaurants in the country, a true madhouse. The kitchen was a long, narrow trench with roaring flames on one side and a vast, boiling steam table on the other. The heat was so intense that cooks would regularly pass out on the line and have to be dragged away. The crew was a rough bunch of lifers, hardened veterans protected by a powerful union that guaranteed their jobs but ensured a certain mediocrity in the food. It was a jailhouse atmosphere, full of hyper-macho posturing and drunken ranting. His first few weeks, his personal tormentor was the shop steward, a big, ugly cook named Luis who thought it was his right to constantly grab Bourdain's rear end. One day, Bourdain had had enough. As Luis came in for another grab, Bourdain subtly turned the huge, rusty meat fork he was using and brought it down hard, sinking both tines deep into Luis's knuckles. Luis screamed like a burning wolverine. The whole kitchen erupted in laughter. And just like that, his life improved. The other cooks started treating him as an equal. He had made his bones. After the Rainbow Room, Bourdain and his old friends from Provincetown tried to start their own culinary revolution. They took over a failing restaurant in Soho called Work Progress. They saw themselves as an all-star group of culinary superstars, a rock and roll band that was going to tear a new asshole into the New York restaurant scene. It was, as he called it, the happy time. They were high all the time, on pot, cocaine, quaaludes, LSD, and, increasingly, heroin. They believed it was their professional duty to work through the drugs, the fatigue, and the pain, showing no visible effects. They were a band of brothers, ragged and debauched warriors who expected nothing less than total victory. They were also pranksters. One of their favorite gags involved crafting frighteningly realistic severed fingers and other body parts out of sweet dough. A waiter would open a refrigerator to find a bloody, torn fingertip, Band-Aid still attached, pinned to a slice of bread. Their greatest performance was when they stripped one of their own, a cook named Dimitri, naked, covered him in stage blood, wrapped him in saran wrap, and hid him in a chest freezer. They then asked a manager to grab a box of shrimp from that freezer. When the poor man lifted the lid, he found what he thought was the nude, blood-splattered corpse of their missing comrade. He was so terrified he couldn't return to work for an hour. But the party couldn't last. The restaurant was failing. The paychecks started bouncing, and the vendors demanded cash on delivery. Bourdain saw the writing on the wall and jumped ship, leaving his friends to go down with it. He was on to his very first chef job, with the beginnings of a nasty little heroin habit. What followed were what he called the wilderness years. It was the lowest point of his career. Fresh off heroin and stabilized on methadone, he became, in his own view, nearly unemployable. He was a shiftless, untrustworthy coke sniffer, bouncing from one doomed restaurant to another, often working under an alias. He worked in a seedy hotel, a lunch counter, a deserted crab house. For a time, he even worked in a mob-run chicken joint, where his cooks were all ex-convicts from a halfway house, and he had to have meetings about bread deliveries in the back of idling Buicks with guys named Mr. Brown. He was a culinary ghost, feeding on the expiring dreams of misguided restaurant owners, just trying to make enough money for his next fix. He was a disgrace, a disappointment to his friends, family, and himself. He was in a deep, dark hole, and he knew it was time to try and climb out. The man who pulled him out was a West Village legend, a man Bourdain calls Bigfoot. Bigfoot was a cunning, manipulative, brilliant, and physically terrifying restaurateur who ran his operations with the precision of a military general and the paranoia of a crime boss. The first thing Bourdain heard about him was a rumor that he had killed a guy with his bare hands. Bourdain was at his lowest point, broke, shaky, and just out of rehab, when Bigfoot hired him to cook lunches. On his first day, Bourdain had to ask for a $25 loan. Bigfoot, without hesitation, handed him $200. It was a tremendous leap of faith, and Bourdain was so shaken by this unexpected trust from such a cynical man that he swore he would never betray it. In Bigfoot land, there was order. You showed up for work 15 minutes early. Period. 2 minutes late, you were sent home. It didn't matter if the president's limo had crashed and you had to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. If you were late and you lied about it, you were fired. Bigfoot taught Bourdain the single most important lesson of his career: character is far more important than skills. Skills can be taught. Character, you either have or you don't. Bigfoot understood that there are two types of people in the world: those who do what they say they're going to do, and everyone else. Under Bigfoot, Bourdain was transformed. He went from a druggy screw-up to a serious, capable, and responsible leader. He learned how to run a kitchen, how to manage people, and how to command respect. Bigfoot got inside his head, and to this day, Bourdain admits he still wakes up every morning at 5 minutes to 6, always before the alarm, because the thought of disappointing the man, even years later, would be treason to his trade. If Bigfoot was his boot camp, his time with Pino Luongo was his finishing school. Pino was the owner of a string of high-profile, celebrity-filled Tuscan restaurants, a man known as the Prince of Restaurant Darkness. He was feared, envied, and admired, a master of both food and the brutal politics of the high-end restaurant world. Bourdain, a chef who up to that point had sneered at Italian food, was hired as the executive chef for Pino's newest venture, Coco Pazzo Teatro. It was his biggest break yet, with a salary higher than he had ever dreamed of. He was thrown into a pressure cooker. He had 10 days to create a menu, order equipment, and hire a crew of 30 cooks for a celebrity-studded opening. The atmosphere around Pino was paranoid and conspiratorial. It was a jungle of shifting alliances and political maneuvering that made Bigfoot's world look like a playground. One day, Pino called him into his office. "Anthony," he asked gravely, "do you have any enemies?" Someone had called Pino's private number to badmouth Bourdain, calling him a pothead who stole other chefs' cooks. Bourdain was terrified, thinking his great opportunity was about to vanish. But Pino just smiled. "You know, Anthony," he said, "I have many, many enemies. It's good, sometimes, to have enemies. It means you are important." Pino taught Bourdain to love Italian food, to appreciate its clean, simple integrity. But more than that, he taught him how to watch his back. In the end, Bourdain was outmaneuvered by the complex politics of Pino's empire and was asked to step down. He left, but he took something valuable with him: the phone numbers of some of Pino's best Ecuadorian cooks, who would become his loyal crew for years to come. All of these experiences, the good, the bad, and the ugly, forged him into the chef he became. A chef who understands the secret world of the kitchen, a world with its own language, its own code of honor, and its own tribe of misfits. So, who are these people cooking your food? According to Bourdain, they are fringe dwellers, a dysfunctional, mercenary lot motivated by money, the strange lifestyle, and a grim pride. In New York, they are most likely not American. The Ecuadorian, Mexican, and Dominican cooks he worked with made most culinary school-educated white boys look like clumsy, sniveling punks. They understand the American dream of hard work leading to rewards better than anyone. The life of a line cook is not about creativity, it's about mindless, unvarying repetition under battlefield conditions. Their religion is mise en place, their setup of salt, pepper, oil, and ingredients. It's an extension of their nervous system, and if you mess with it, you're messing with their soul. The common language is a profane mix of Spanish, English, and French, where "suck my dick" can mean "hang on a second," and every other word is a creatively deployed curse. It's a world where your street name might be Flaco Skinny, Gordo Fatty, or Cachundo Piece of Ass, and you just have to live with it. It's a tribe, and like any tribe, it has rules. You are never, ever late. You never call in sick, unless you're suffering from dismemberment or arterial bleeding. You never make excuses or blame others. And you never, ever steal. Bourdain leaves us with a few hard-earned truths. He advises you never to order fish on a Monday, because the fish is likely 4 or 5 days old, left over from the weekend. He warns against brunch, calling it a dumping ground for the week's odds and ends, cooked by the B team while the head chef is off. And that hollandaise sauce on your eggs Benedict? It's a petri dish for bacteria, most likely made hours ago and left to sit at the perfect lukewarm temperature for germs to multiply. And what about the person who orders their steak well done? In the kitchen, this is seen as a crime against food. But it's also an opportunity. That tough, slightly skanky end cut of sirloin that's been sitting in the fridge too long, the chef isn't going to throw it out. He's going to save it for well done, incinerating it for some rube who won't be able to tell the difference between fine meat and garbage. It's a brutal, unforgiving world. But for Bourdain, it was also a world of honor, of loyalty, and of a strange, dark beauty. It's a world where you earn your place not through your resume, but through your scars. Lying in bed on a Sunday morning, his hands and feet radiating pain from a crushing Saturday night service, Bourdain takes stock of his own scars. The 1.5-inch callus at the base of his forefinger, where the heel of his knife has rested for years. The deformed pinky finger, twisted from a lifetime of handling a whisk. The beveled-off fingertip he lopped off cutting peppers. The layers of scar tissue on his knuckles, a roadmap of one kitchen after another. He finally got the hands he always wanted, hands just like Tyrone's. And he wouldn't have missed it for the world. Commentary. When you close the final page of Kitchen Confidential, you don't just feel like you've read a book. You feel like you've been initiated into a secret society. Anthony Bourdain didn't just write a memoir. He gave us a key to a locked door, and what we found on the other side was a world more intense, more chaotic, and more profoundly human than we ever could have imagined. The most powerful lesson in this book isn't about food. It's about finding your tribe. Bourdain was an outcast, a misfit who felt like he didn't belong anywhere. But in the kitchen, among the pirates, the junkies, the ex-convicts, and the immigrants, he found a home. He found a place where the only thing that mattered was whether you could do the work. It was a brutal meritocracy, but it was an honest one. Your background, your education, your mistakes, none of it mattered if you could hold up your end on a busy Saturday night. In a world that often feels obsessed with appearances, the kitchen was a refuge of pure, unadorned reality. Can you take the heat? Can you show up on time? Can you be counted on when the orders are flooding in and everyone is in the weeds? Those are the questions that define you. And there's a powerful lesson in that for all of us, no matter what our profession. It's a call to value character over credentials, and resilience over a perfect resume. Another beautiful idea that runs through this book is the notion of cooking as a craft, not an art. Bourdain had a healthy suspicion of chefs who thought of themselves as artists. An artist, he believed, was someone who didn't think it was necessary to show up on time. A craftsman, on the other hand, was someone who took immense pride in their professionalism, in their ability to perform a task with expert fashion, over and over again, with consistency and grace. He reminds us that there's a deep nobility in mastering a craft, in dedicating yourself to doing something well, not for the applause, but for the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. So, how can we apply the wisdom of the kitchen to our own lives? First, learn to embrace the fire. Bourdain's journey shows us that true growth often comes from humiliation and pain. His failure at Mario's, the moment with Tyrone's hands, was the single most important moment of his professional life. It broke him, but it also forged him. Don't run from the moments that humble you. Lean into them. They are often the greatest teachers you will ever have. Second, find your Bigfoot. We all need mentors who hold us to a higher standard, who demand discipline and refuse to accept our excuses. It may not always be comfortable, But that kind of tough love is what transforms us from amateurs into professionals, from kids into leaders. Find the people who believe in you enough to tell you the hard truths. And finally, never forget the power of that first oyster. Remember what it feels like to take a risk, to try something new, to step outside of your comfort zone and taste the future. Bourdain's life was a testament to the idea that good food, and a good life, is all about risk. It's about being open to adventure, even if it means you might get sick, you might fail, you might get your heart broken. The alternative is to play it safe, to never stray from the familiar, and to arrive at the end of your life with a long list of regrets. That was never Anthony Bourdain's problem. And it doesn't have to be yours. That was a summary of Kitchen Confidential by Anthony Bourdain. We've journeyed through the highlights today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you make the journey yourself. The true magic of this book is in Bourdain's voice, his raw, witty, and unapologetically honest storytelling that makes you feel like you're sitting at a grimy bar with him at 2 a.m., sharing a drink and a story. This summary is your invitation. If anything we've talked about has sparked your curiosity or made you see the world a little differently, I urge you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just learning, it's an experience that will change the way you look at every restaurant, every chef, and every meal for the rest of your life. A link to the book is in the description below. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It lets us know we're on the right track and ensures you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book. Let's keep growing, and let's keep reading together.